it's Yamina again. I hope everyone is doing well. Today I wanted to do a brief video on my experience of doing jury duty. I don't know if anyone has experienced it before, but I actually experienced it for the first time in the summer of 2015. And during that summer, I was actually preparing to take a trip back home to New York City to visit my family. And I was going to go with some friends from my congregation. And I actually really didn't want to do jury duty at this time, but everybody that was selected to do jury duty were informed by letter, and then we had to go into the court to actually sit in an audience and be I forget the word for it, but basically we had to be talked to. They gave us some paperwork to fill out, and I guess the paperwork included possibly our religious affiliation as well. So I put that down as well, and I'll tell you in a minute why I realized they did do that. That my religion had to be put down because anyway, so they started asking us questions. They told us how it would be determined if we would be on the jury and if we would be on a jury, because it was actually, we were all called up for multiple possible cases, and then they would select people depending on the case for that particular case or not. And so we were in an auditorium of about, I don't know, I feel like there were 100 people. It could have been a lot less, but felt like a lot of people. There were about maybe 11 rows, and there were the rows were set up, and there were one main row that had maybe like 11 seats per row, and then maybe about 11 rows down, and then there was another section that had maybe like 4 or 5 seats, and then about 11 seats to the back, like lined up. So there were plenty of seats for about 100 people, really. And I'm not going to multiply that. But anyway, so we were all given, we actually got to speak to a judge or two, and then like a few of the attorneys that were in the courtroom, and a few of them asked us questions. And I figured out that I did for sure write down my religion, because like the lady, one of the attorneys was a woman, and she looked at me and she was asking a question of basically like, she basically said something to the effect of, some people are not allowed to make judgment on others because of this, that, and the third. And I think she actually asked me that question. I feel like she might have actually asked me that question, because the people that were making selections for cases were actually allowed to ask people as an audience or ask people directly questions so that they could get a feel for us. And so I think she actually directly asked me that question because my religion was on my paperwork. And I told her, like, depending on the case, like, I would not feel comfortable on certain cases, which would include like cases with the death penalty, because I'm against that, and it's not even a political thing. It's my religious belief. Like, I don't believe in the death penalty. So I would not want to be on a case like that. But also, I just don't want to be on. I would not want to be on cases that were just talking about a whole bunch of stuff that I wouldn't want to hear, and that I would be either uncomfortable or, yeah. So I'm not gonna bring out what the case was, but she basically did ask me a question. Then they also allowed us to speak if we did not want to be on a jury, even though we weren't guaranteed to be on one. We were allowed to speak in front of the whole auditorium to. So we would go up to the microphone and speak. And I actually was trying to get out of doing jury duty. I actually, because I was one of the very few people of color in the auditorium, I actually was convinced that there was a possibility that I would be selected, but I thought if I made this appeal to not be selected, that they would not select me. So basically I told them that I was trying to go back home to New York City to see my relatives, because I hadn't seen my family since 2008, and it was 2015 at this point. and I knew that we would not be able to go to work if we were selected for jury duty. So I would not be making that money if I would be going to jury duty. And also, they only compensated us. I forget. I think they paid us like under $10 a day, not even an hour. I think it was like a day. So it was not a lot of money. And so I was stressed out that I wasn't going to be able to save enough to be able to go back home to visit my family. So I made that appeal, and they listened to everybody, and then at the end of the day, they dismissed us. And I think I feel like I left at like 3 o'clock. So we were basically sitting around answering questions, asking questions, filling out paperwork, and that was like the first 2 days that we had to go. And then from there on out, we had to call in with a number that we were given specifically and find out if the group that we were assigned to, if we were selected for jury duty or not. I ended up being selected for a jury, and I was disappointed because that meant, and we didn't know how long the cases were going to be for. It all depended on how things ran and how the whole process went. But if I remember correctly, I feel like I did jury duty for 2 weeks for the specific case that I was involved in. And the case I was involved in basically involved a peace officer's life safety being threatened, and basically we had to figure out if the person who was accused of that, if they were guilty or not. And not going to go into any more specifics other than that. So that was the case that I ended up being assigned to. I believe I did it for 2 weeks. And what's funny is we had a very nice bailiff. And what's funny is that, sort of funny because it's actually not good, we had 12 people selected who were going to be on the jury, and then we had 2 alternates selected. And one of our alternates, when we actually went to the court to actually like get ready for doing the first day of the case, one of our alternates was in a room with us that we were brought to by the bailiff. And the next thing I know, he was like gone. He like walked out of the room. And we were told as soon as we went into that room, do not leave this room at all. Like, if you need to leave the room to go to the bathroom or anything, please let us know. But otherwise, don't leave. So the one of the alternates, so we had 14 people in the room, he decided to leave. And he just said out loud that he was leaving. And basically, he was going to get in trouble. I don't know what happened to him. We never saw him again. We had the other alternate, so there were 13 people in the room. But once he left, we never saw him again. And from what I understand, you get in trouble when you do that because he was not following the law. And if you did, yeah. Anyway, so like I said, I did not want to be there, but I had to go. My employers knew, and they had to deal with it. And I'm going to say this is funny. So my experience of being on jury duty was an enjoyable experience. It was different from like being at work. The case wasn't overly stressful, but it was very important for us to like speak and express ourselves and make sure that we were looking at the case the way we were told to look at the case. So we were in the room, and then we were taken to the court room that we were going to be in for the trial that we were going to be dealing with, and we got to meet the judge, and we were given a rundown of what we specifically had to do with this case. So before, I don't remember if the lawyers were in there, but for sure the bailiff, the judge were in the room, and then the 12 jurors. I don't know, I don't believe the alternate was there. I don't believe he was. But yeah, so the 12 jurors were in the room, the bailiff was in the room, the judge was in the room, maybe the attorneys were in the room, but nobody else. None of the defendant and the plaintiff weren't in the room. And we were told basically how things were going to go. So we were told, if you need to ask questions about this case at any point, get the attention of the bailiff by not calling him, but like raise your hand or give him some eye contact to get him to come over to you, and you can give him a question on a slip of paper and he'll give it to the judge at a certain point. That paper never went to any of the attorneys. And if for any reason our question needed to be discussed with the attorneys, the judge would call one of the or both of the attorneys to his bench, or to, to his podium, and they would have a quick discussion, and they would kind of like, they would play music. They would play this weird sound so that we couldn't hear what they were discussing. I forget what it was called, but it was something. It's a sound that we had. Where we were sitting was a long, I think all 12 of us were able to sit in one row. And in front of us, there was wood paneling, and there was speakers that came out of it. So the music would like play, like if they didn't want us to hear them, they would play that music so we couldn't hear what they were discussing. So we were told if we had any questions to get the bailiff's attention, write it on a piece of paper. We had notepads with us, and pens. Write it on a piece of paper and give it to the bailiff. He would give it to the judge, and then the judge would ask the question or determine if the question wasn't going to be asked. And we were told the rules of making a decision in our private room. So we were told the rules. We were told, don't take into consideration like what the penalty would be if this person is found guilty. Just take into consideration beyond a reasonable doubt, did this happen or did it not happen? And then they gave us another rundown of, like, I forget the full list, but I remember those in particular. Like, we weren't supposed to take into consideration what the punishment would be if he was proven to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. We were told that is not what you're supposed to be taking into consideration, and that's that. I remember that very clearly. Everything else I don't remember very clearly, but they did give us a list of rules, and we tried to make sure that we abided by this, what they wanted us to look at when we were listening to the case. So we were given the rundown. I don't know if we went back into our room after that, but we were given the rundown, and then within a day or two, maybe within that hour, the trial started. I don't remember. I don't remember if the trial started that first day or not, but when it started, I do believe my whole jury duty experience lasted for 2 full weeks, and that's including from the time I was called in to go for basically the vetting, interviewing kind of process, all the way until the end of the process with the trial, with the case that we were dealing with the trial that we were dealing with. So at one point, okay, so we started the trial. We got to meet all of the people involved in the case. We got to hear witnesses speak about the case. And I don't remember the witnesses saying anything that was very informative, but definitely the defendant, which I believe was a person who would have gone to jail if he was found guilty or not, like, he was believable. He seemed like a very kind of timid person. And then the plaintiff, I guess I decided that he was a liar. And because one of the questions I asked at one point that I wrote down on the paper was given to the judge, was given to the attorneys to look at. They never asked that question. And I figured out later that question was basically checking with someone about their honesty, and I didn't realize that. But yeah, I was confused about something he said, and I wanted to get it verified. So we went through the case. We ate a few meals there. Other days I would go out with 3 of the other jurors that I met at that location. Like, I met them the first or second day that we went for jury duty, and then when we actually were assigned to the same trial, like, we actually just intuitively started going to lunch together. We went to a Chinese buffet, which was super good, and we did that a few times, and then we went to a few other places, and then at a certain point the court actually started feeding us, and it didn't matter, like, I actually brought my lunch a few times as well. And what else? At a certain point, the bailiff, when we were in our particular room, I don't know if it's called the chamber, but we were in a room that we were assigned to. The bailiff told us that we needed to select the foreman, and that person's basic role was going to be the person that was going to give the judge the final verdict. Not the final verdict, was going to give the judge our final, what we decided, guilty or not guilty. And that person also was not in charge, but basically supposed to make sure that everyone was able to speak when they wanted to speak in the room that we were assigned to, that everyone was heard, that we organized ourselves in a way that allowed us to express our opinions, to follow the rules that we needed to follow in order to determine what the outcome was going to be, and just to kind of keep the order in the room. So we decided, like, okay, I was the youngest person in the room, if I remember correctly. Maybe I was the second youngest. But anyway, I was one of the youngest people in the room, and we had to decide who was going to be the foreman. No one volunteered, and me being extroverted, I volunteered, and everyone agreed because we had to agree on who the foreman was going to be. So no one volunteered, I volunteered. Everybody voted on it, and it was said yes. So I was the foreman. I didn't have to do much. Like I said, it was not like an overseer kind of thing. It was just basically making sure everyone expressed themselves. I didn't really have to say much except just to express my own opinion as well based on the case and the facts we were given. We were given audio evidence. We were never given any visual evidence. We were allowed, of course, to listen to the testimonies of the plaintiff, the defendant, and then witnesses who came in. And I think I said there were about 2 or 3 witnesses that came in. And so yeah, I was chosen as a foreman. I decided to do it, and it wasn't a big deal. We had a very good group of people. Everybody, like, I was actually thinking that the person was guilty based on like all the information that we received, and with thorough discussion, with us eating lunch and making sure that we were like satiated and not like really hungry, and then talking about something that was serious, but not life endangering. They were able to convince me, the other jurors that were believing that he was not guilty were able to convince me by discussion that he wasn't guilty. And to verify that, we were also allowed to call the bailiff, and then the bailiff could take us back to the courtroom, and then we could tell the judge what else we would like to hear, what else we would like to ask. Like, they allowed us to ask questions. They allowed us to listen to evidence again. And we actually had pieces of evidence that were shown to us as well. I forgot about that, but they were like in evidence bags. So we did get to see that. But they allowed us, if we needed to go back and forth into our room versus into the courtroom, to listen to anything, to ask more questions, we were allowed to do that. And it would usually just be the judge in there, the bailiff. I don't remember if the attorneys were in there. I don't remember if they were. I think they might have been. But, yeah. Okay, I don't remember that part. But we were allowed to go back and forth if we needed to, but we didn't do it often. We only did it when we were trying to figure out, literally, is this person guilty or not? Let's listen to this audio evidence that we heard and see what we think of it. And when we listened to it again, that convinced me that my fellow jurors were correct and that this person was not guilty. And so that's what we determined. And when it came time for us to deliver the verdict to the judge, we called the bailiff again. He took us back into the courtroom. He always had to take us to the courtroom, from our room, or from the courtroom back to our room. And then I believe he always had to lead us to the main part of the courthouse, not outside, but to the area that was beyond the offices, so that we could leave from there by ourselves. But he had to take us to that part, and that was the part that we first came into when we were basically doing our interviews for jury duty. So anyway, so we called the bailiff, told him that we were ready to give our verdict. This was after we had a lunch. Our lunch was pizza and sandwiches and salad, probably soda too. But that's what we ordered for lunch, and then let me try. Sorry. Anyway, so that's what we ordered for lunch, and we decided that this person was not guilty, and I reminded people like we weren't supposed to take into consideration what he would face if he was considered guilty, or what he would face if he wasn't considered guilty. We just had to figure out the verdict. I only had to say that once, because some people were talking about what if, and we were like, that's not what we're here for. So when we finally determined it, we called the bailiff. He took us back to the courtroom. The judge asked us if we had selected a foreman, and we told him yes, and he said, who's that? And I told him it was me, and he asked us if we had reached a verdict. We said yes, and I did not have to say what the verdict was, thank goodness, because, yeah, I didn't have to speak much in court. Like, I didn't have to say anything that I remember, minus just a yes. And that was said before the defendant and the plaintiff came back in the courtroom, if I remember correctly. So they weren't there. The lawyers were there, the bailiff, the judge were there when he asked those questions. And when he asked the verdict, if the verdict was given, he said yes. We said yes to him, and then we were supposed to write it down or something, and we gave it to the bailiff, and the judge took it. So then he called everybody back into the courtroom, and he read the verdict, and the defendant was happy, and hopefully he's doing well. And the plaintiff, I don't remember what his reaction was, but the defendant was definitely happy, and the plaintiff, I don't remember. I don't remember seeing him after his testimonies. But yeah, so that was my experience doing jury duty. We were escorted back out to our room. The bailiff told us, which was super funny and cute. He's like, this was the happiest jury group I've ever met. He was like, it was such a pleasure to meet you all. You all take care. I don't remember his name, and even if I did remember his name, I wouldn't say his name. But I don't remember the name of anyone that I worked with in 2015 for this case. I do remember the specifics of the case, and basically that was the case. So yeah, we had to decide if someone actually threatened the bodily safety of a peace officer, and we decided he was not guilty. So it was a good experience. I hope never to have to do jury duty again, and if it's ever a case that I would be completely uncomfortable with, I will make sure they know, because like I said, there's some cases that I would never want to be involved in, and it was a good experience. I actually had to tell my boss thought that, he said to me at one point, like, oh, you wanted to do jury duty, and I was like, no, I didn't, but I made the best of it. Like, I actually really didn't want to do jury duty because, like I said, I was trying to go back home to New York City so that I could see my family after not seeing them since 2008, and so I was really invested in going to see my family, and I didn't get that opportunity because my paycheck was severely cut from not being at work for 2 weeks. So yeah, I didn't end up getting to go home for 2 reasons, and it was a good experience, but it wasn't an experience that I was trying to have. I was forced to have it, and that's that. But yeah, so that was my story of experiencing jury duty. If you have any questions, let me know. But yeah, it was fine. And witnesses are not blocked from doing it. They just have to determine if they are comfortable and if their conscience would allow them to be a part of that particular case or whatever they're selected for. So with jury duty, it's a conscience-based decision if we feel comfortable doing it. But like I said, I was forced selected even though I tried to get out of it for personal reasons. But yeah, that's my experience. I'm going to stop rambling, and I will talk to you in another video. Bye. Take care.